work as a volunteer coordinator at the Human Library. Many of you probably have had some exchanges with me already via email. And we have my colleague Katie that will take us through the book orientation and will explain a lot of things to us today. That is important things that we should know before continuing with the training. Okay, I can see that someone has written that they were unable to register for this Zoom session. Okay, thank you, Martellus. And welcome everybody. Thank you for writing where you're from as well. And you can, of course, rename yourselves and put the location in your names, the location you're at, and also how you've heard about the Human Library, why you decided to apply. And also we would like to say that we're actually very aware of the fact that many of you have in fact applied perhaps a while ago or a few months ago or even a few weeks ago. But we will also just like to mention that because we've shifted our system a little bit so that we can actually make sure that everybody gets a chance to participate in the Human Library, we've finally been able to reach you, because sometimes our emails might have ended up in your spam folder or might have not even arrived to your invoice at all. So we're happy that you at least could get this one email from us. Yeah, I can see that many of you are writing a lot, like that you've seen us in an article, or you probably maybe have met already someone that is active within the Human Library as a human book or as a librarian. So that's great to see. We will now move on a little bit to our schedule of today. So you can see now we will go through why the Human Library, like why we've decided to call it the Human Library, the principles of a great book, open book, of course, the pillars of prejudice, a bit about the book titles, how the readings work, what they are, and also the next steps. Then at the end, we will hold space for Q&A. So I will already tell you now, whoever has questions can stay, and whoever maybe is in a rush can also leave right after the next steps. So you're very welcome to stay if you have the time. Now I'll give the word to Katie, and we will start.
Thank you so much, Claudia. And as Claudia has said, welcome everybody, whatever stage you're at in your inquiry or discovery about the Human Library. Apologies for my croaky voice. I've got a bit of a sore throat at the moment, so I'll be diving for the Lemsip over in the corner there. But yes, the Human Library, as you may already have done your own research online, or you may have discovered it via social media, or you may have been to a Human Library event as a reader. You may have even been as a book before, but this is the opportunity for us as the Human Library to bring you all up to the same speed, up to the same safety, and the same kind of understanding of what the Human Library is, to really decide whether this is for you and whether we are for you in that sense as well. So we want to give you the opportunity to discover that. I'm going to talk for about 22 minutes. If you've got questions, please put them into the chat and we will incorporate them in a Q&A at the end. And some of them we may answer directly in the chat, and others we'll give you some time at the end to discover. The Human Library started in 2000. I encountered it in 2008/9 in the UK, where I'm actually based. And I came along as a reader to a Human Library. And then within a few months, I became a book. And then over my time in the Human Library, I've done the roles of librarian as well, and now more often than not involved in opening up events and speaking at them, or being a trainer as well. So there's many roles within the Human Library, and we use the metaphor of a library when we're talking about what we do, because a library is one of those completely neutral, universally understood institutions that is in every country, that is in every city, and hopefully in most towns and villages too. People have access to libraries. They understand what it is. They understand that you go in, you borrow a book, and you get either inspired by something or you learn from something. And that is the opportunity in the human life to borrow these areas of knowledge, but particularly actually areas of human experience. And that's what books are in the library. And the books in the human library are people who want to be understood. And you'll discover as we go through just this short 20 minutes, and when eventually you're then invited to go onto our full training platform, that there are two aspects in the human library. There's the reader and the book. Obviously, we're also here as librarians. We're here to facilitate things. But the main component of the conversation in the human library is the reader and the book. And it's the opportunity to give voice to the books, people who've experienced marginalization or discrimination, stigma or stereotype, but also to give voice to readers and the opportunity for them to learn to turn your pages as an open book. So they're the two roles that we want to kind of talk through a little bit today, the role of the reader and the role of the book, and whether you would make a suitable book in that context. But that metaphor of the library, as I say, keeps us neutral, keeps us apolitical, keeps us a-religious. We have religious books. We even have books who are politicians, but we don't kind of politicize in the human library or evangelize in the human library, but we do allow people to read you and ask questions. So what are we looking for in an open book? And if we can have the next slide, please, Claudia. Fabulous. So as I said, the book component of this is people who've experienced a degree of difference, marginalization, prejudice, hardship. They have a diagnosis, they have an identity, they have an ethnicity, they have a faith, they have a belief. They have an experience. It may be an experience of victimhood or surviving something, being othered or misunderstood, stereotyped, prejudiced, stigmatized, etc. All the ways in which you potentially could have a label put upon you by society. We'll talk a little bit more about labels and titles and topics in a moment. But the main thing as well, everyone who's experienced those things I've just described, those different aspects of life where you've been marginalized or misunderstood, etc., that doesn't necessarily make you an open book in the human library. It makes you someone who's experienced those things. And everyone in that sense has a story. We all have lived experiences, but the people we're looking for in the human library are those people with those experiences who are willing to be open to their readers, to allow readers to flick your pages and actually go backwards and forwards in your life and ask you personal questions. So it isn't the opportunity to necessarily do a story tell, to say, hey, this is the beginning of my life, this is the middle of my life, and hopefully not yet the end of your life, but to tell someone your story all the way from beginning through to end. Is not a narrative. It is the opportunity after an initial introduction of just a few minutes to allow someone else into your life, to walk in your shoes by asking you questions and you responding with the chapters, with the lived experiences, with your wisdom of your life that you have learned from being you. So in that sense, we're looking for these open-minded people who, and here's the big thing. We talk in the human library about unjudging someone, but the first ask of you is that you won't judge your reader. And we'll come back to that in a moment. So we're looking for people who want to create understanding and empathy in your readers. And who as a book doesn't not want to be understood. We want the readers to understand you, but you also have to have a degree of understanding towards them, that they're going to come with curiosity, with kind of a degree of kind of, what do I want to know about you? But they may also come with fear. They may also come with skepticism. And what we're asking of you is not to judge the reason they came to borrow you, but in actually just to be this open-minded, unjudgmental book that allows them to discover. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So as I've been saying, the biggest thing we're asking of you, and this is the thing that sometimes people don't realize is going to be the thing we ask in the human library, is that you don't judge your reader. A lot of people think it's all about don't judge a book by its cover, which was very much our older language that we used to use, don't judge a book by its cover. But we realized that in only using that language and that particular well-known idiom and metaphor, that we were creating an us and them between reader and book. And we were saying that the readers are the bad people, the books are the saints. You come along and read the saint and you lose your biases and your prejudices and that kind of thing. Well, that's a wonderful thing if that happens. But I can tell you, and it's absolutely true and honest, that even as books, we have biases and prejudices and judgments. As soon as you sit down in conversation with a reader, the first thing you're going to do, because you're human, is to judge your reader. You're going to be making assumptions as to why they borrowed you. What question's going to come out of them first? And when they ask that question, you're going to be thinking, where does that question come from? You're also going to be sharing space in the human library with other books, and you're going to be judging them too. And what we mean by judging is we're not saying necessarily a moral judgment. We're not necessarily saying it's a kind of an unconscious bias judgment. It's just a human judgment. It's just recognizing that as human beings, we make assumptions about others. So hence our shift from don't judge a book by its cover to just unjudge someone, which that means, and it reminds us all, librarians, books, readers, everyone, to kind of stay on that journey towards unjudging others. So one of the things you'll discover as we talk about again today is that we're asking you to spend time on the human bookshelf with other people who are books as well, who may not also be your cup of tea. They may hold different political or religious beliefs to you, and you may not always agree. You don't have to agree in the human library, but you do have to kind of agree to spend time in the space with the other books and time in that space with your readers. So we're asking you to be a source of understanding for your readers, and the willingness from you to not take offense when they ask a question that they may ask with language which isn't your preferred language, because they themselves may come from a different cultural worldview, a different language, a different age or generation, a different belief system. And as such, they may not have your preferred language when talking about your topic. Even with people who share the same topic we have discovered in the human library, take, for example, language around disability. We discovered over the last few years, particularly when we started doing Zoom events as well as our in-person events, that when we had books who were disabled from the Northern Hemisphere, from Scandinavia and Northern Europe, books from the UK, books from the US, and books from the Far East, their language around disability was different. They each had different outlooks on how disability or mental health or neurodiversity should be phrased. And we discovered that even the books could almost fall out with each other because we don't use that language here. So we're asking for you to be generous towards your readers when they use language that may not be your preferred language. And also to kind of speak on your own behalf as a person, as an individual, about your experiences, not to suddenly stand up and speak for all the disabled people of America or all the disabled people of the world, because you don't know how the rest of them have experienced life. So if your preferred language is person with disabilities or disabled person or suffers from or handicapped, those may be different language that come to you through your culture and your experience. And you have a right to speak with your words, but your reader may come with different words. So we ask you to simply say, hey, I'm going to answer your question, but my preferred language is this. But equally, the next time you borrow another disabled book in the human library, you're going to get a different lot of language anyway. So the human library is a safe space to make mistakes for the readers. And they're not even mistakes. It's a safe space to discover that we're individuals, that we don't have these giant categorized homogenous languages that we all agree on. So one critical thing, therefore, is to not take offense. That also means you may get asked a question that may appear a little triggering, that may appear insensitive or a little bit too personal. Well, we want you to allow the reader to ask it. And then we will train you in the full training how to also say, I can't answer it, but not to make the reader wrong for having asked it. We want them to take a risk. The human library is, we call, a safe space for risk. It's a brave space, not just a safe space. So we want them to have the opportunity to ask a question. So, for example, I'm a transgender person, and transgender people typically don't like being asked what their birth name was, or, perhaps whether they've had the surgery, or what they do in bed, or things like that. Sometimes we may not want to answer that. So a reader, though, may be curious, and this is a place for them to discover that perhaps it isn't the most appropriate question, but we don't want to get our red pen out and kind of tell them off instantly. We want to respond with something like, hey, I completely understand why you'd be curious to know that. Hey, if I was you, I would be too. However, people like me aren't entirely comfortable answering that question. And actually today, that part of my life isn't available in the human library. So we use the language of publishing to say that part of my life isn't published. That's a chapter that's not available in the human library to be read. I often tell my readers, though, hey, my middle name is too much information. So now you've asked it, I'm going to tell you anyway, but you may regret the answer. So you can bring in humor, you can bring in your own personal boundaries and safety. And we give you lots of methods around that in the full training, how to keep parts of your life private, and also parts of your life public within the Human Library for your readers. But we want the readers to be free to ask, free to discover, free to be curious. And thank you, Marcus, for bringing a fabulous cat. Sorry, I just saw a fabulous cat. I get very distracted by cats. I have 15. It's not my book title in the Human Library. But anyway, we that's another thing. That brings us to the point that also in the Human Library, it's a human experience. And so we want your readers to be able to have a human conversation with you. And that conversation means both parties are talking and listening and asking and hearing. And sometimes that means if you've been going on for a long time in a really long answer or a very long introduction, we actually do encourage your readers to interrupt you. And it's okay to be interrupted. We ask them to be not a little impolite, but to go beyond certain types of cultural politeness and not to just sit back and listen. We want them to engage with you. So if your introduction is particularly long, we will have already told the readers it is okay to press pause on you and to say, hey, what you're telling me is fabulous, but I've already got 16 questions and I'm going to forget them if I don't get to ask one soon. So is it okay to jump in and ask a question now? So again, if you feel like in the Human Library, you feel like you've got to get your point across, you've got to tick off all the different things you want your reader to know. And if that's going to be frustrating for you, you've got to be able to put that on the back shelf and allow the front shelf to be what the reader wants to know. At the end of every single conversation, there'll be some things you didn't get across, and you have to be able to hold that lightly. But equally, it means that every single conversation in the Human Library is unique because your reader is going to be different every time. They're going to bring different questions. It means you will never get bored because, particularly if you're your own story, because you're not reciting the same thing. It's not like you being an audio book. You're actually responding to the reader's questions. And sometimes you're going to get a question and you go, wow, I've never been asked that before. That really makes me think. Thank you. And it is okay to pause and have silence and have that happen. So these are dialogues. These are human conversations. And we want that to be the kind of vibe in there. So hence again, and it's about being interested in dialogue, not about a monologue. It's about being interested in this conversation, not in conversion, not in trying to persuade your reader to your point of view. It's not being an activist. It's not being angry. It's not being political. But it can be being a politician and telling people what it's like to be a politician and have people hate you, or have people disagree with you, or have to have very little privacy in your life. But we want people to be able to hold these conversations. It's also not a debate. It's not a kind of trying to bring two polarized extreme views together. You may occasionally get someone who comes as a reader who has polar opposite views to you. But more often than not, you're going to have curious people. More often than not, you're also going to have people who share some experience with you as well, which is why it's important to yield the conversation to your reader quite quickly in the conversation, because you don't know what they want to know unless you give them the opportunity to ask. So if we can go forward to the topics section now, please, to Pillars of Prejudice, as we call them. Thank you. So these are what we call the categories in the Human Library. And we're not about categorizing you, but as librarians in the Human Library, we still have to put you on a shelf somewhere so we can organize our events. We still have to recognize that in society, when people walk down the street, they are going to see short, tall, fat, black, white, Muslim, disabled, transgender, whatever it might be, facially disfigured. People observe, and people kind of do our own little filing, our own little sorting hat. As soon as we see people, we're doing it in order to be able to navigate life and try and be safe most often than not. Sometimes we will cross the street to avoid someone. Sometimes we will cross the street because someone looks interesting, and we will actually cross the street to encounter them. But what we're doing is we're putting these little labels on people all the time. In the Human Library, we're not about labeling people. We're about offering people the opportunity to peel back the label and discover what's inside the box. But we can't even do that unless we acknowledge that what we do as human beings is put people in boxes. So there's two aspects to that. Therefore, we're recognizing that readers will box people. Readers will put labels on people. But secondly, that when you're a librarian and running events, and when you're organizing the Human Library, it is natural. You have to decide where on the bookshelf to put the book. And if you open up a book on the inside, you will see what's called cataloging data. And it says file under psychology, file under theology, file under mental health. So these are kind of filing areas. So one of the reasons we have them is to ensure that all of our events have maximum diversity at them. And you'll see in the next slide, which we can go to now, please, Claudia. We have around 15 different areas of difference and diversity in the Human Library. This isn't the sum total of human life, but it is the total of kind of where we're at in our understanding. We used to have 10 topic areas, we used to have 12, now we're up to 15. You may see, hey, there's a big area that's missing. Well, then let us know over time. We keep learning from our books, and our books are the ones that tell us, hey, I've experienced this degree of marginalization, this stigmatization, this stereotype, this misunderstanding. And that's how we learn who's in it. Roughly speaking, we have, I would say, 250 plus different individual topic areas, all scattered around these 15 areas. And you may see areas there and you may say, oh, I see my book title there, or I don't see my book title there, or I see my book title there, but it's in a category I don't associate with. And that's because, again, we're a bit flexible on that, we're fluid on that, and we keep learning. You may find in your culture that a topic area that you think should be is in mental health, actually we've put in neurodiversity. Or you may find a topic area that's in disability or lifestyle or something else like that is in an area that you're not expecting. As I say, this isn't a strict categorization. This is simply a holding space so that we can organize our events and try and have at every event at least half of those topic areas present at an event. That's why with the human library, we're not the thematic library, we're not the mental health library, we're not the refugee library, we're not the LGBT library. We always have a kind of a scattering of the diversity of humanity present at each of them. So there's some of the kind of the topic areas that you will encounter in the human library. And if we can just skip to the next slide, please. Now, we recognize as human beings, we don't live single issue lives, but when you're being read as a book in the human library, we're asking your readers to initially read you as a single issue. As during the process of unpacking you through questions and conversation, they may discover other aspects of you. For example, you might have a mental health challenge, and you may also have a faith, and you may find that your faith helps your mental health. But we wouldn't have you borrowed as a faith/mental health topic on the front. We wouldn't have you borrowed as a sexuality plus faith topic on the front of the label, because very often that actually serves to de-stereotype you in the very first instance. So, for example, you might have a kind of quite an orthodox faith position, but you might also be someone who is lesbian, gay, or bisexual. And that might be a surprise to someone to be the bisexual Jew, to be the Muslim lesbian, or something like that. But if we publish those topics together like that on the outside of the cover, the stereotype is already broken. So instead, we would publish you either as the faith or as the sexuality, and perhaps the other thing would come out in the conversation. And you may have seen on the previous slide and on the bottom right of the graphic on this one, victim of incest, victim of rape. Sometimes we do use the victim language because that is how you're perceived by society. But you may find that if you have been the victim of abuse or something, actually you see yourself as a survivor. And that is exactly probably how you should see yourself. But your reader may not initially. So sometimes you might be published as a victim, but you show them that you're a survivor in the conversation. And so that's one way in which we distinguish between, say, victim and survivor, but that's another kind of category area. So what we're asking, therefore, is for you to find one topic that is the topic that has most affected you, or the one that you most want to speak about, the one that you're most confident to talk about, or the one that you find has had the most stigma in society that you want to kind of destigmatize. That's the one to pick as your topic in the human library in the first instance. It doesn't mean it will be your only topic in the human library. It doesn't mean you won't talk about other experiences. As you grow in the human library, there will be opportunities to publish under other topics or bring up those other aspects as chapters in your conversation with your reader. But as I say, that's the kind of the way we talk about the topics. And these topics are really simple, short, concrete labels, as I said, because that's what we do to people. We put people in boxes. The conversation is the unboxing, and that's the bit where you get to kind of de-stereotype your experience through that. So don't think of your topic as something that's got to sound really interesting and inspiring. Your topic is actually pretty mundane. Your topic is what society or the state or medicine does to you, or something with which you identify, whether that's a sexuality, a gender, or a faith, or something like that. So if we can just go through to the final slide of my bit, please. That's also just to give you a heads up, we're coming to the end of my bit as well. But what we're talking about, therefore, is these conversations with your readers, not monologues. So not you just talking at them, but having an exchange. That also means you don't have to be concerned about thinking, oh my gosh, I couldn't talk for half an hour. I wouldn't know what to say. I need to write it all down in advance. Well, you shouldn't really need that kind of level of information, because really you only need to come up with anything between 2 and 4 minutes worth of introduction. And then you hand it over to your reader. And by then, they will at least have been stimulated to have at least one question. And then everything becomes natural. It's a human conversation, a human dialogue of interest in that respect. So you've probably only got to do half of that 30 minutes or 20 minutes of that 30 minutes as conversation. Also, you don't need to prepare things in advance because you're actually being asked to speak from your own experience, from your own values, from your own truths, from your own history in that sense. So it's going to be true. It's going to be authentic because it's you. We're not asking you to speak about the belief systems that you belong to if you don't know the ins and outs of the theology of it, but about what it is like to have that faith or something and to be judged for it as you walk down the street because you have a visible faith, for example, or because you say no to certain things in life because of your faith. So we're not asking for people with a faith to be a theologian. We're just asking you to be you and to open up to a reader and tell them your personal experiences. So you don't need to be an expert in anything other than your actual personal experiences. And these 30 minutes fly by really fast. At the end of it, even the reader says, I didn't get to ask all my questions and the time flew. So do not worry about those 30 minutes seeming like a long time and having to prepare for. Secondly, within these spaces, these 30 minutes, they're what we call a safe space for risk. We will give you lots of training in the actual full human library training about how these spaces are safe, how the librarians are there to keep you safe, our role as librarians to kind of look after you. But within the space of conversation, we describe it as a safe space for risk, because we want the reader to risk these questions with you. And we don't know what they're going to ask. We don't know what you're going to say. In fact, we never tell you what to say, other than to not judge your reader and not to speak ill of other topics in life as well. We're asking you to be on your own unjudgment journey towards other topics in the human library, to be willing to share that space with them. So if you're a religious person, perhaps, or of orthodox beliefs, to be willing to share that space with topics who might be LGBT. If your role in the human library is as a police officer, to be willing to not judge those who are ex-offenders or have an occupation or lifestyle that you might think of skeptically. Or if you have an ideology that doesn't line up with another ideology in the human library. We're simply talking about people sharing their experiences. So our safe spaces for risk are about the kind of the magic, the chemistry of two people asking questions and being free to ask those questions and not to be judged for those questions. And that is the beauty of what the human library brings, particularly in this day and age when we do jump upon people for saying the wrong thing. So we want you, therefore, not to take offense at that. Obviously, we're not going to tolerate a reader who sets out to be offensive, sets out to be antagonistic, sets out to attack you. And again, you'll be told about how librarians handle that in the full training. But people will accidentally maybe trigger you simply because of the way they ask something, or because the impertinence of asking something. But we want them to risk asking that. So we will, again, in the full training, tell you how to handle that. The librarians are there for support, and that is their role as well. Right, so Claudia's is going to take you through very briefly the next step about what happens next. And in the meantime, I'm going to scan the questions that have come through in the chat and see if there's anything to answer as well.
Yes, thank you so much, Katie, and thank you all for being here. The next steps will be the book portal, so we will be sharing a Google form in the chat briefly. And I can share it now as well. And there you can sign up to then, so that we can add you to our portal where you will go through the training. And once you've completed the training, we will have a short check-in with me, probably. And we will discuss more about, any questions that you might have about the training or your title, or if you need any help from us, from our side, if anything seemed unclear. And also, we will discuss more about the book release that you can see as the third step here. And the book release is basically your first reading. You will be mentored through your first reading, but it will be technically your first reading. And you will also have the chance to read another book. And after that, you will be then ready to join also the Human Library events in general. It will be in person or online, depending where you're located. We have events in a lot of places, but as I already said in the chat, mostly in the US, UK, and in Denmark, more often at least. But if there is something close to where you are, we will make sure to let you know, to get in touch with you and ask you if you will be available. to participate. But of course, most of them also are online. Many of them are also online, so everyone is very welcome to join them as well. If you have any other questions about the next steps, you can also ask us in the now Q&A session that is coming up. And here it is. So thank you again so much for being here. If anybody has to rush out of the meeting, you may do so. Otherwise, you are very welcome to stay as well now during the Q&A session. Otherwise, we can go through the questions, perhaps.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions I can answer straight away. Two kind of slightly related. One about if you write your story, etc., and also one about recording. So one aspect is Human Library conversations are never recorded. We regard them as a confidential safe space between the reader and the book, or sometimes we do events where you actually get read by a small group of people. So, but again, it's a confidential space because we want them to have the courage to ask those difficult questions. So there's no recording that ever takes place. It may be that you do turn your life story into an actual book, but the actual conversations are conversations. So one, you never kind of read out your book to them, and two, we prefer that you don't actually necessarily like promote your book to them at the end of a reading and like saying, here's the Amazon link to my story. So it's not an opportunity for kind of selling yourself. But you know, if someone says, how do I find out more, you could just say, hey, go Google me if you've done a TED talk or something like that, or you have a book. But don't directly sell. It's not for self-promotion. Yeah, this is, again, not the purpose of getting them to discover more about you beyond that 30 minutes. It's kind of nice if they finish their 30 minutes wishing they knew more and actually it's ended. You always want to walk away from an encounter with someone wishing you knew more and wanting to spend more time with them, you know, rather than less in that respect. But we also keep the book names to first names. So we never give out your full name. So even whether you're doing it on Zoom or in person, we're only usually giving out first names and the book topic, book title in that sense, so that there's no kind of breaches of privacy, and so that no one can go necessarily stalking you afterwards in that sense of the word either. I'm just reading through some of the others.
Yes. I just wanted to say about the last question about the copy of the slides. We won't be sharing them, but you will find all of this information in the training on our portal. So yeah, don't worry about that.
Yeah, it's something that Laura said as well. Yeah, I mean, readers may be pushed by your language. One of the things, again, is our role as librarians when we're at a physical event that's in person, and or when we're doing, say, a Zoom event or a workplace event. We do human libraries in prisons and schools, in workplaces, in university campuses, at festivals, etc. And we were doing one for a United Nations team just an hour or two ago, actually. But when we do these events, it's one of the additional roles of what we call usually the head librarian or a presenter at these events to prepare your readers. And we give them, you know, between 5 and 15 minutes of preparation so that they're clued up as well about the bravery to ask questions, about the fact that there are no judgments, about the fact that language will vary, etc. So yes, we are preparing your readers before they read you. And at every event as well, there are what we call the rules of the reading. People can, whether it's on Zoom or in person, they can put a physical or a virtual hand in the air and ask for help, and a librarian will come along at any point where anything, you know, gets a little spicy, shall we say, in a reading. And we do get the odd spicy reading. It's actually quite rare, but it can be. You cannot predict who will read who. Occasionally you get two people who do come along, and actually they do come from completely opposite viewpoints. But we want to create the safety for that space, but we also will step in when we are needed and when we are asked for. What else can I say? I can see that some of the questions came before I actually answered them actually within the actual talk. What if it falls under more than one pillar? Yeah, the pillars are what we use to kind of file the books in our own headspaces in order to also make sure that every event has at least half of those pillars present. The pillars are not what readers borrow from, and it doesn't matter if you're book topic does sit into more than one pillar, and you yourself have 2 or 3 pillars that you could be drawn from. As I say, simply at every event, people will come along and they will pick one topic to read, and that's how they will see that. The readers never really see the pillars. That's just our understanding to make sure that our events are diverse. So don't worry about that too much.
I have a question.
Yep, who's that?
Who is that? My name is Lee. I am speaking to you from Nigeria.
Hi there. Go for it.
Can I go on with my question?
Yes, please do.
Here in Nigeria and the rest of Africa, I think you don't question. If you have questions like this, or you want to read human experiences and human history, the institution of the elder is revered. You go to them and you speak with them, and I mean, the reason why they are elders is because they are there to be read and to provide information. So there is no question, or it never exists, the question of legality over what an elder shares.
Yeah.
But in Europe and in advanced countries, before you can mentor people, before you can advise or sort of provide guidance to people, the system expects you to be registered as a counselor, so that you don't provide some form of mentorship that makes the other person crazy. A book has a system of being censored. So no matter how beautiful the book is, there is a system that censors book for readership. Is this human library censored? Do you have any way of censoring what goes on there, so that then you don't achieve the wrong objective, you don't achieve the wrong thing? Is it under some sort of legal guidance, or have you thought about it? Have you not thought about it? So far that it is in existing, has there been any question of legal jeopardy? That's my...
Okay, so yeah, I understand some of that, and I want to answer it quite briefly because I want to allow time for a lot more questions to get through as well. But we regard, again, it's a bit like the confidentiality. We regard those conversations as just that, conversations. Books are not giving advice to their reader, so they can't be held accountable. It's not for you to educate or to be a therapist to your reader. If they ask something, you should say, hey, I can tell you what worked for me, but I'm not a professional. I can't give you advice. So yeah, we're not looking to get books into a position of legal accountability for what they have said. And because it is a semi-confidential space, we don't know what the book will say to the reader. But we do ask you, again, to limit your responses to your personal experiences, not to professional advice, etc. in that sense. So that's the kind of one aspect of that kind of liability angle there. That may not have fully answered your question, but if you'll permit me, I do want to try and get on with a few of the other questions. But by all means, if that wasn't fully explained, put something in the chat in addition. What else is there? So when someone was asking, it was Patrick actually asking about what do you include in your introduction, we talk about what to include in an introduction in the full training again. But one way of thinking about it is when you actually look at any particular book that's on a particular topic, there's a bit on the back, the blurb, the general précis of your book, the thing that entices people to open the book and actually read it. So what you want to do in your introduction is kind of put what you would put on the back cover of the book or something like that. And then you might also just tell them a little bit of the chapters that are in your book and say, hey, here are some of the places you can go in my life, some of the questions you could ask. So for example, as a transgender person, you can say, hey, one of the questions you might want to ask me is, when did I first feel transgender? Have I had this done yet? How did being transgender affect my relationships, my employment status? Did it affect my mental health? When, you can give them suggestions of where to go in your life. You're also then giving them both permission and also letting them know that those are parts of your life you're very happy talking about, and there's going to be something to answer. But then you can also say, hey, there's probably some questions you've got that I've not thought that you want to ask. So you're also welcome to ask them as well. So in your kind of introduction, just include a little bit of a précis, a little bit of a summary, and then some examples of where they could go in your life. You might have a diagnosis. You might have a faith. You can suggest to them, hey, you could ask me when I first came to believe this, when I first got diagnosed, how does it affect my life on a daily basis? How does it affect my relationships, my work, etc.? See, somebody else asked, yes, we do these on both Zoom and in person. So even if wherever you are in the world, you can be a book with us, because we publish in multiple time zones throughout the day as well. So we publish in all of the time zones. So there's opportunity to be a book at any time of day that may work for you as well. And we probably do events about 3 to 5 times a week sometimes. So you'll find an opportunity to publish at a Human Library event as well. And we also have an online platform, which also has additional opportunities as well. Just scrolling through a few more of these quickly.
I think there was one about by Leighton, if a librarian could help with the title. Is that how you meant it, Leighton? Because then, yes, during the check-in after the training, you will be meeting up with me or another of my colleagues, and we can find a title together if you're unsure.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
No worries, of course.
So the titles we try to kind of keep them very simple, very short, and that's it basically. And there's just some types of events. Sorry, excuse my throat. Some types of events, people will come up and borrow you, and they will come up to the librarian and say, I want to borrow your bipolar book, please. You know, I want to borrow your refugee. I want to borrow your gay book. I want to borrow your Muslim book. And they will choose you by the title. And that means they've come to you and they already want to know something about you. So one of the first things you can do as well is very early in your conversation with your reader is ask them, hey, would you mind me asking, why did you pick my title? Because it may be that they actually share that title with you. It may be that there's someone in their family with that title. It may be they've had a negative experience, a skeptical experience, or they're really curious. So it can be really important not to dive into a long explanation without first discovering why your reader is there and why have they come to you. Because then, you know, for example, you could end up explaining a mental health condition and discover that your actual reader is a psychiatrist and he knows it really well. They just wanted to get your perspective on being you. So if in those particular circumstances, always ask your reader why they're there. And, you know, this is about asking questions that sometimes are a two-way street. The other type of event that we do, both the Zoom ones and the in-person ones that we do in workplaces and schools, you get borrowed by a group of people and they haven't chosen you. In fact, you're an absolute surprise. They have no idea what your book title is going to be until you open your mouth. And when you open your mouth and say, hi, my name is Katie and I'm your bipolar book, and they go, oh, but you look transgender to me. And you go, no, actually, I am transgender, but my book title today is bipolar because we don't live single issue lives. So in those ones, the librarians have organized what's called a reading plan, and they will have organized an event that enables readers to read, say, 3 different books from 3 different of our pillars and get a broad experience of diversity on those days. The benefits of those events is that everybody gets read. You don't get left on the shelf because people didn't think, oh, that topic doesn't sound particularly interesting. So at those events, you always get read 100% every time. But it does also mean your readers haven't chosen you. They've no idea what they're going to get until you talk. So you have to kind of put a little bit more interest into your introduction because they haven't come with a desire to borrow your particular title. So those are different varieties. And the second, the group variety, really allows people to kind of encounter their pre-existing biases and prejudices because they can't avoid you. Whereas in the kind of the public events, you tend to get the typically curious people who are much more kind of open-minded or kinder already in the first place. But if you really want to kind of, I guess, change the world a little bit, then the group ones are fascinating because people have no idea what they're going to get and they didn't choose you. So it's an incredible opportunity and encounter as well. It also means they can't opt out, they can't avoid, etc. But because you're all lovely people, it makes it very easy for them to have a conversation with you. It's not prickly at all in that sense. Oh, yeah, someone's already been at one of those. Fantastic. Approximately how many books are there in the human?
Question?
Yeah, go for it.
Ariful, did you have a question?
Ariful Hawk? Your hand was up. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Katie,
Yeah.
for inviting me in this session of Zoom meeting. My question is that can I have a dialogue as a book to reader through Zoom or any kind remote conversation platform? Thank you very much again.
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. Do we do the dialogues on Zoom?
Yes, I'm talking about Zoom.
Yes, we do them on Zoom. We don't use we have our own platform that we have built to enable people to do conversations online where they can pick your topic, but they still read you in small groups. And then we do Zooms where we organize it and we pick the topics for them. But yes, we have, as I said, we have Zooms happening in all the time zones multiple times a week, both for the general public and for specific workplaces. We work with over 100 different organizations who regularly use our Zooms for them to further their diversity experiences at work. So there's a tremendous opportunities. So yes, that's exactly that. You can use Zoom, which means you can log on to these events from anywhere. Thank you. To allow people to jump off the call now, please feel free to leave. Please don't forget to take that link with you and click on it to be able to register for the actual full training, where you will see me and some other people pop up again. It's a series of bite-sized video trainings, so you can do it gradually. It doesn't mean a 45 commitment at once. You can just like commit to 10 minutes, do a bit of it, go back another night and do another 5 minutes. So you can work your way through all of the training segments. If anyone does have any remaining questions and wants to stay on, you are welcome to for a few minutes, and we will hold any additional questions if you're still here.
Yes, the link is here again. I'm sending it through.
Yep.
And that question about how many books we have in the Human Library, I would say it's hard to say.
Well, we're active. Prior to COVID, we were active in probably something like 60 to 80 countries. Coming out of COVID, not every country rebooted as quick as the others. And then we have a new country called Zoom. So that gives us new opportunities anyway. But I would say there, if you count where we're working around the world, across the world, including all of the events that might take place on campuses and in small towns, there are literally thousands of books. But those that we're directly working with, particularly on the Zoom platform, that runs to a few hundred in that sense, because there's an active group of books who are specifically serving up these events to kind of organizations as well. So it's in the realm of hundreds to a few thousand, I would say. But some are more active than others. And also this is one of the reasons for why we're shifting the way we do things, and we're bringing in a kind of the spider's web of the human library over the world. We're trying to bring back some of the threads in to centralize that registry of who are books in the world and how can they be involved. So sometimes there will be books who are doing an event in a village that we know nothing of, and every time an event something about the human library goes viral on social media, on Upworthy or on Instagram or something, often people say, oh yeah, you should come to the human library, we have one in our town, and we look at it and go, we don't know about that one. So yeah, we're trying to actively get all of the events, all of the books around the world re-registered with us, so that everyone is working together, so we can bring you the benefit of our 23 years of experience. Every time we have an event, every time on occasion it may go wrong, we learn from that experience and we incorporate it into our training. So the benefit again of this is making sure that all of the books are actually trained centrally now, so they're all brought up to the same standards, so that if you ever go to a human library event anywhere in the world, you will encounter the same degree of professionalism, the same degree of safety, and also the same degree of opportunity to learn, to discover, to be unjudged in that respect. So we want the maximum impact, maximum safety, maximum professionalism and reputation. So that's why we're trying to bring everything back into that central opportunity. And it was the benefit of Zoom that brought us that, obviously in COVID, to enable us to connect all those dots in a virtual way as well.
Hi, Katie. This is Margaret Philbrick, and I'm up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, so my Zoom is not the greatest. So I joined you via phone, and I'm just asking if you or Claudia could also email us that link to the portal, because I am not going to be able to copy it, I don't think, given the Zoom is not working great. Is that okay?
We can do that, can't we, Claudia? Yes or not?
Of course. Yes, would you just... Okay, would you just mind sending your name to me so I can just email you directly, please? Because I think it just comes up as a number.
Sure. Sure,
Are you-
Margaret Philbrick.
Yeah, it's the one with the telephone number, and there's two versions of it on Zoom, Claudia. So she's dialed in via phone for the audio, and then Margaret Philbrick in Wisconsin. I know Madison well.
Perfect.
Oh, good. That's where we live.
Thank you.
Oh, really? Okay, you can go and visit my
Yeah.
ex-girlfriend then for me and say hi to her.
Okay.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking, really. Well, I did go and see her in January off the back of a Human Library event. But yeah, she lives in Madison. She's a therapist there.
Oh, nice. January's a rough time to go there, though.
Oh no, I've been there in 3 or 4 foot snowdrifts.
Oh, God. Okay.
It's extreme.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Margaret.
thank you for this today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Anyone else? If not, in the next minute or two, we'll close down the event. But
Yes, perhaps I can now decide.
thank you, Margaret. Your cat
Stop the
appears.
sharing.
We do actually do human library events for the World Wildlife Fund, and it's the one. It's some of the events that when we do come, their readers actually encourage people to bring their pets to the event. But you will also find that in the human library, particularly when we're doing Zooms, that half of our books are always bringing their cats to the event. So cats and dogs are welcome in that sense. I have to ban mine though, because I have to talk to the readers up front without having cats pouncing on my head during the readings. So.
Oh, wow.
3 giant breed dogs. Fabulous. Yeah, you'll find that one of the things in the human library that's a fringe benefit is the community that you build with other books, whether it's in a local space because you're actually doing public events and local physical in-person events, or whether it's the Zoom. You will meet people from around the world, you'll become friends with people from around the world, and you'll all end up discovering who the cat people and the dog people are.
Just saying that there's a lot of cats.
Yes. Mortellus, I can't remember whether that was the name you were using. You may.
Leanne, yeah.
Yeah, you have a question?
Hi. As an author and public speaker, I travel all over the world. Is there a way to coordinate with the Human Library when I'm traveling, if there might be events?
Yeah, our events are always listed on the Human Library website. They're actually picked up from a Facebook event feed, so you can always tell where there is a public event is going on somewhere. And if you are traveling in that area, we can connect you with the local organizers to be involved in that event. We've certainly had several books travel around and show up at events as guest books in that sense. So that is definitely possible. If you are traveling to places, certainly like say parts of the US, the UK and Denmark, more relevant, I would imagine, would be the UK and the US. Sometimes we are doing workplace events in those places, and if you are traveling, you may be involved in those as well, but you might have to let us know. But yeah, so the public events are always listed on our website, but the workplace events that are in person, people in the actual the group, the worldwide group depot will be announcing it, and you'll see that come up as an invite.
Oh,
And
certainly.
say I'll be in that country, then could I be a part of it? And we'll say yes.
So if I, for example, sent my travel list over from my publicist or something, and so you could have that, would that be a good way to do that?
It might be. We might get inundated with requests like that. It might be. You're welcome to send it to me, and I would certainly have a look and say, oh, these are the cities in the UK. If it was the UK, these are the cities in the UK, and we can connect you with one of our American organizers, for example, and they would tell you what are the cities in the US where there are events coming up.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any last questions before we close off this?
Doesn't seem like it. Well,
No.
thank you so much. It's been great having you here. Oh, sorry, there was someone.
I was just saying thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you,
Thank you, Ron.
Ramon.
And we do have we do have events actually in the Bay Area as well. If you are in San Fran, yeah.
I'll be more than happy to participate. Yes, San Francisco proper.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So yeah, so we eventually, once you're trained up, we'll put you in contact with our organizer in that area, and they're aware of all the events everywhere from kind of all the way from Sacramento down to San Fran.
Own a car, we'll drive.
Yeah, there's plenty of events in NorCal and in SoCal.
This is Leanne.
Right.
Did I misunderstand earlier, Claudia? You said you were going to speak to me. How are we going
About
to?
the book topic, was that?
Yeah.
Uh,
So
I think that was about kind of fine tuning which book topic to choose.
yeah.
We do some bit more about that in the online training. We
Oh, all right.
we
All
go
right.
into greater depth about how to
Okay.
pick the topic. And
I'll wait for that then. I'll wait for that
We go
then. I
through
need to
that,
get
and then
going.
even after doing that, you can actually talk to someone anyway, because
Okay.
we'll reconnect to you on another kind of
Okay.
face-to-face before we take you to the next level. And we'll tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Bay Area. I'm just going to, for those in NorCal, I'm just going to we'll eventually put you in touch with someone called Leslie Skipper, who is based there, based in Berkeley, I think. And they will let you know about the events. We have a Facebook group actually for that area. So I don't know if you're a Facebook user, but it can be worth it, because it is one of the ways the group as a community then says, hey, there's an event coming up in such and such a place. Who wants to go there? Who wants to travel together? Who's available as a book, etc. And we do have events out towards San Jose as well.
okay. Well, if you don't have any other questions for us, we would like to thank you again. And well, wish you a good day, evening, afternoon. And thank you so much, and hope to see you at any upcoming event once you're done with the training. And you'll probably see me again for sure during the check-in. Yeah, thank you so much, and take care. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.